Seven, six, five, four, three, two, one.
You'll never have the sacred stone.
Oh, this you crazy mother.
I think we're talking about. I think when we had discussed last, when we last left this conversation, was differences in opinion on art and capitalism and how it could exist. But there were a couple things I wanted to clear up before we get started, or clarify. Some clear up, some clarify.
All right, that sounds good.
To be sure. One of the clarifications is what we are going to. I know this is going to be part of the conversation too, so this is like an awkward clarification. Is what we are going to consider art for the purposes of this conversation. For example, are we putting like video games and movies in this conversation?
Well, personally, I think absolutely.
Okay.
But I would say not all video games and not all movies, though.
Sure. Well, I would agree that not all movies and not all video games are art. Maybe I would walk that back a little bit. I would certainly say that not all of them are good art. Whether or not they're art, I think is still maybe up for debate. But certainly, not all of them are good art.
Yeah, I think I kind of think of it as I think that there are different kinds of for video games, for instance, there are different kinds of video games. As in, like, there are some games that are more, if anything, they're more like a sport than art. Do you know what I mean?
Sure.
Like, so I think that there's like, I think that like within the medium, I think there can be like diversity in like the type of thing that there is. So I think that I don't think every video game necessarily is or is trying to be art necessarily.
Right. So yeah, I would agree. Like Call of Duty is not art as a video game. There might be art in Call of Duty, like character models or whatever, but the game itself, I would probably agree that it's not. It's not even trying to be art.
The multiplayer, but the single player, maybe you could make a case, but like I
Sure.
wouldn't say it's good art necessarily.
Sure.
Maybe some of them, but
varying degrees of good plot writing and things. Sure.
yeah. So I guess we both are coming from. You said you are a fan of Camus as well, right?
Yes. Yeah. I do like to see the absurdity in things, and while I can't embrace that fully because I'm only human and I still get frustrated at things that frustrate me, I do retrospectively try to see that how absurd things are and kind of take that forward.
Yeah. What the way that I'm bringing this up, that I think it's relevant is so basically, kind of the idea of absurdism is kind of that, like, the meaning of life is like, I mean, part of it is that the meaning of life is like, I mean, like Camus says, the meaning of life is whatever keeps you from killing yourself, essentially.
Yeah,
um
yes.
so but what I kind of think that is relevant here is because I believe we talked a little bit about fictionalism, didn't we?
I'd have to go back. I don't think
No?
so, but it's been a bit since we had our
Okay.
conversation.
Well, so essentially, I think that absurdism is kind of a type of fictionalism where the are you familiar with fictionalism as a concept?
Ooh, um, see if I am.
Sorry, what was that?
Yes. Just not as that. Yes, although. But go on. I want.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll so essentially I think that so fictionalism essentially is kind of the idea that you can have beliefs about the nature of the world that are separate from your beliefs about um kind of uh meaning, I guess, in human life, sort of. So essentially kind of kind of one of the tenets of absurdism is that while it is the case that the universe is meaningless, as in the universe will provide no objective meaning to your life at any point, the kind of the fictionalist element is that we kind of have the ability to, like, in a rejection of the meaninglessness of the world, to kind of say, like, well, hang on, who cares if the world wants to say that there's meaning here, because, like, that doesn't matter if the world wants to assign meaning to it, because meaning is like a human thing. um like, we kind of, like, we create the meaning. So essentially we should, the prescriptive claim is that we should use meaning um in the way that best serves us, essentially. um as opposed, like, so while the world has no inherent meaning, we should use, like, our constructed human meanings in the way that we go about interacting with the world, because it is better for us if we do. And also I think it's just essential that we do this. Does that make sense? Do you follow what I'm saying there?
Sure.
So the reason I this applies is because um I kind of take this fictionalist outlook and on, like, a broader way into, and I kind of am a fictionalist about a lot of things, including art, where I think that while it is the case that there is no um like objectivity to, like, aesthetics, like, the universe will never,
Right. Okay.
definitively say, like, this is better or
Right. Show me
whatever,
the
or
good in this art. Yeah.
yeah, but, like, we shouldn't care what the universe, like, provides for that, because, like, the meaning is a human thing. Like, we create the meaning, so, like, we can use it how it would best serve us, essentially. And I apply this same thing to, like, moral philosophy,
I think you have to,
and
right? I mean, that, well, I guess you don't have to. I mean, I would find issues if
yeah.
someone didn't, but sure.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I think you have to, but people don't agree with that,
Right.
essentially. Um, but the reason I kind of think that we are fictionalist, like, in essence, is because I think that we kind of, just by virtue of being human, assign meaning to the world that is not inherent to the worlds or true about the worlds in virtually every single way we interact with the world. Um, for example, just like our concept of language is like, like, the word that we have for a tree, like, a tree is not the word tree, right? Does that make
Right.
sense? Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
but we kind of assign that meaning to it, even though it's not representative necessarily of reality.
Right.
um
Yeah.
this is kind of like, that's kind of, we're taking a fictionalist approach there. So that's kind of how I
Yeah. The
that's kind of,
semiotics kind of way to do that. Yeah.
yeah, that's kind of the framework that I go about talking about art in, essentially. So basically where I'm coming from is that the way that we ought to kind of define art or talk about art is in the way that is best for us, essentially. So I think that what we consider art and what we don't consider art should be determined based on how uh how how good it is for us to have it be set that way, essentially.
Interesting. Okay.
Do you have any do you have any problems with that, or do you differ on that perspective?
I, uh, I mean, I think that you have to, because we have the similar stance on the moral necessity of fictionalism. Like, there is no inherent good or bad in the universe. You can't point to it, right? It's not objective. I think I have to agree on some level.
Yeah, on some level, but you don't have to go all the way. You don't necessarily have to agree that that we, like, for example, there are a lot of people who would just say that, like, it's not worth trying to even define art. There are a lot of people would just take that stance, like, that trying to, like, pinpoint what art is like not worth doing. And that it doesn't serve us to kind of have like an aesthetic philosophy or whatever, because of the fact that it's because of the fact that, like, they would say that it's like a subjective thing, um like, entirely. So that's kind, a lot of people kind of have that view. So you don't necessarily have to accept that. So that's
Right.
kind of,
I think that's,
yeah.
I mean, I don't agree with that either. I think we do want to define art at least somewhat. I don't think it's helpful to not do that. I may have a pretty broad definition of what is art, but I probably um, would narrow down what is good art. Although I do recognize, no, this isn't true. Uh, what I was thinking wasn't true, not what I just said. Um, I do know that I like art that even I would consider isn't good art, but I can reconcile
Mhm.
those two things. Like I know this isn't good, but I still enjoy it.
Yeah, that's
Um,
actually something Hume talked about. That's I don't know if he was the first person, but some of Hume's aesthetic writing, I kind of, that's where I kind of am familiar with that idea from, that you can kind of hold a separate understanding of kind of what you think is quality art or
mhm.
not quality art, that's kind of separate from your personal enjoyment. And I find that convincing, I would say.
Yeah, but I think even with that, there are probably things that I could would so. Um, one example of art that I enjoy that I recognize is not good um, on a lot of levels. There are parts that I would probably argue that are good about it, but I really enjoy the movie Constantine. It is one of my favorite movies. I recognize it is not a good movie. There might be parts that are good art wise, but it's overall just it's not a quality film. Like there's writing issues, there's plotting issues, there's character development issues, all of these things, and yet I like it. But one thing, and we briefly talked about this, I think, is some art that I do like, and I think is uh, not always, but in various forms, good art are like these little Funko Pops. Oops, wrong side. Over like some of these guys.
Yeah.
Um, I do recognize that some of them
Mhm.
they vary in quality. I'm not going to dispute that. But even though they are mass produced, I like, for example, let's take this little um, Sunday narwhal thing. I think it's cute and fun. I think it's a great design. You've got like a little cone and the ice cream. It fits a narwhal. It does things that I think art should do, which is elicit like an emotional response. For me, it's just like this cute and it thing, and it just makes me happy. Uh, that said, I like I said, I don't think like all of the pops are like that. Uh,
Yeah. So what I would say is I think that it's um I have no problem with enjoying, like, people enjoying Funko Pops or anything, but I do think that um I would say that they are, I don't consider them art. Rather, I consider them, I guess I consider them a commodity, rather than art. And I don't think that that's, like, necessarily like a problem, but I think that, so I guess I'll so okay, I'll kind of make my case for why for what I think is art, if that's all right with
yeah,
you. Kind of
absolutely.
go into my argument. So um I might have in the when we were messaging kind of briefly got into this, but so essentially a lot of my thought on art is heavily inspired by an essay by Oscar Wilde called The Soul of Man Under Socialism. Um and kind of the point that he makes in this essay about art is that art is individualism. That's kind of like the essence is um is kind of individual expression that some the more like individual something is, the more artistic it is, essentially. And that isn't necessarily like you could still be individual, but you could just like individualist about art, but you could be untalented still, and it could still be like not it could still not be good. But like the essence of what art is like individualism. So um the kind of a metaphor he uses to kind of talk about this is to kind of compare an artist to like a craftsman, to say that the role of a craftsman, the job of a craftsman is to meet a demand, um as like make a product to meet a demand for people, um as like somebody needs a place to sit, so a craftsman makes a chair, for example. Whereas the role of the artist is kind of the inverse of that, where the artist is more, the goal of the artist is rather than giving people what they want, it's more about um, making people like it's more about having people see what you want them to see, essentially. Um, like providing your unique perspective to them, um regardless, I mean, not entirely regardless of what they want, but like you're not, your goal as an artist is not to appease like the mass of people. And if an artist is working with the goal of like meeting a demand or giving people what they want, then they're no longer an artist, and they are in the role of a craftsman, um because they're no longer pushing boundaries or challenging anything. And so to apply this to the Funko Pop thing, I would say that Funko Pops are more of the like in the line of a craftsman thing than an artistic thing. As in, the kind of the role of Funko Pops is people have like an attachment to these certain characters, and so there's a company that's willing to kind of manufacture these figures of these characters to kind of meet that demand, essentially. um and there's not really any there's not really much individuality going into that, because they're using existing properties um to meet demands of what would be popular. um and so that's why I would consider them not art. But not to say that there's nothing good with them, or that you shouldn't like them or anything like that, but that is how I make the distinction, of what I consider to be art.
Okay. Uh, hmm. So for you, it's important to separate craftsman from artist.
Um,
Is that what
that
I'm?
that's kind of the metaphor to like to express like the broader point, essentially, that an artist is kind of inherently challenging at things, and providing their perspective, and being individualist, whereas a craftsman is meeting demands of other people. They work to appease, essentially.
Hmm, interesting. So would you feel that same way about like commissioned art?
Mhm. I would, yeah. I mean, that's not to say that like so I don't think that I think it's really hard to say that something is either like 100% not art or 100% is art. I think of it's more like a spectrum where something can be more or less artistic. So I would say that commissioned art is kind of less artistic. But I mean, you can still be like, there can still be like artistic elements to it, like for sure. But I think that somebody who's doing commissioned art is definitely not as much of an artist as somebody not doing commissioned art.
Okay, so when someone has like total freedom, like complete freedom over what they're doing, that is going to be uh, the true art, the actual like art.
I mean, not
Is that
necessarily, because one could have total freedom but still choose to like meet demands.
oh, sure. But what I guess what I meant is the only way that art is like real true art is possible is with total freedom.
Um,
Because if there's any constraints, then it's meeting some kind of demand. Or like if there's any I guess not constraints. I mean everybody's constrained in some way, whether it's tools or whatever.
yeah, I would say
But
anytime you compromise your vision is when I would say you're kind of doing you're kind of being less artistic if you ever if you compromise your artistic vision.
okay, interesting. So I do understand what you're saying, but I also I think I would agree in some instances when there's severe restrictions, but I do also would have to I would have to go with there are some cases where those constraints help produce a kind of true art in the same way that uh, a complete freedom of choice can lead to like muddiness in a lot of different ways in whether it's writing or um, painting or whatever it is. Once you narrow down like a topic or something, like even if someone comes up and says I'm going to commission a portrait and the artist has free reign within that constraint, I feel like that can be more artistic than be like I just want to commission a painting, I don't care what you do. The results from that could be uh, terrible. I mean, it could be good too because you don't know what they're going to do, but because there's no focus there, I think
Yeah, that's why I don't like to that's why I wasn't I'm not a big fan of like conceiving of this in terms of like freedom or like artistic liberty, because I don't think that is necessarily like the amount of like freedom or liberty you have is like necessarily the thing. I think it's specifically the individualism. So
okay.
I think like if your individual expression is involves you putting boundaries on yourself, um in order to express what you're trying to express, I think that that's not any less art. And also, I think that like I said, I think of this on like a spectrum, as in like it'd be hard to kind of say that this is like this thing is 100% art as opposed to this thing which is like 100% not art. um uh, uh I like to think that it think of it more like something is more artistic than something else. But to some degree, like not I don't probably there's probably nothing in existence that's like 100% like pure artistic expression. um but it's more like that, something that kind of uses this like this framework as kind of like a guiding thing is more artistic than something that's like appeasing other people.
Sure. Art from and for the self as opposed to just art for, I mean, commodity, right? For appeasing someone else. Uh,
Yeah, I would say yeah.
okay. I mean, I don't know that I like disagree terribly. The I guess this is why I was why I was trying to uh, uh, clarify what types of art we would be talking about, because in the case of things where an audience is necessary, which would even be performance art, like or yeah, any type of performance art, really, uh, whether it be just someone in the middle of Central Park doing a performance piece, or a movie or a video game. At some level, it has to be for the audience, right?
Yeah, that's a good observation. I would say that I don't think that your individual expression has to necessarily exclude other people. So for example, I think that for let's use film for an example. A
Mm-hmm.
director would be I would consider a director kind of the main artist behind like a movie. Like because they have the main artistic control. It's kind of their vision is kind of like they have like the final say. They're kind of the one who's
Ideally,
so I
yes.
kind of uh-huh. So I kind of consider them as like the main artist. However, I wouldn't say that people like actors and actresses are not artists necessarily, but what I would say is that the director can have an artistic vision that kind of leaves room for the actor's artistic vision to be expressed. Um, you don't need to have in order to have your artistic
Yeah, thanks
vision,
for
you
the
don't
follow,
necessarily
Alex.
need to like rigidly um kind of define every single aspect of it like to a T. You can have some room in terms of like the actor, how they go about their role. Like leave you can leave some room for their artistic expression
Yeah, thank you. I
within your
appreciate it.
vision as long as it doesn't contradict your vision, or ideally as long as it goes in line with your vision. Um and I think you can kind of apply that to all other things like that. Like if the audience if the artist has audience participation somehow in mind in their arts, um uh but it's still like as a part of their vision, um then I don't think that it precludes it from being art.
Sure. I mean, uh, yeah, yeah, I don't think it would either. I guess it just depends on to the degree at which it is art, or like how artful it is. Because even if we were talking about with commodities, like they're not necessarily not art. There's like some line there. It's just like how um, I don't know, pure the art is. I don't know what term we want to use here.
How
Uh,
artistic it is, I
how
guess.
artistic it is, yeah. Um, Someone not limited by, especially like with the pops, not limited by an existing brand, an existing IP, um, might do something uh, completely different, and one that isn't necessarily designed to sell, that doesn't have to
Hmm.
sell to exist, of course.
Yeah.
Um,
So I think a good way that I kind of like to talk about this is kind of that art um kind of if we were to introduce like democracy into art, that would be it would be like the death knell of art
I
essentially.
mean, we see,
um
I've seen this with like
yeah.
city murals and things. Like people,
Mhm. Yeah,
no, I want this and this and this, and they
exactly.
try to incorporate it all in um,
Mhm.
or even yeah, um,
Yeah, I think you need to have your own coherent vision.
mhm.
um and the more like people have their own coherent vision being expressed in like at the same time that like that is different from yours, the less individualist it is um for you, because the more voice is being expressed,
Yeah,
like the less your voice is expressed, um essentially. And and I think if you want to use your voice to like have somebody else say something, then that's not necessarily like I think that's not the same thing as democracy. Like, I don't think
Right.
you're democratizing art in that case, because it still is your vision as the guiding principle, and you're still your individual uh idea and expression is still the guiding thing that is motivating it. And um so I think that that's kind of the essence of this, I think, is that um any kind of like art should be kind of in spite of the audience almost. Art like that caters to the audience is just I think I have no interest in it, really, essentially.
That's fair. Well, that's fair. I probably do on some level in some weird ways, um, not because I recognize it as art, but probably because I want to see some sort of train wreck. Like I will watch the Transformers movies not because I think they're good or because I think they're art, but because I want to see a Dinobot, and I don't care about the rest. Um,
Mhm. Yeah, and
so
I think the person making the Transformers movies is probably on the same page as you, and they don't think of themselves as an artist either, most likely.
yeah, not in the same way. Sure, yeah. So I do have a couple because we were talking about art and capitalism, and under
Mhm.
capitalism, and
Yeah.
one thing that I wanted to discuss with you with that. Well, one, I want to clarify: I am anti-capitalist. I do not like capitalism. So I want to get that out of the way before
Mhm.
I make this point, which is going to make it
Alright.
seem like I probably like capitalism in a certain way. Uh, so right now, and a lot of this has to do, I know, anti-capitalist. Uh, a lot of this has to do with the way that money and industry works, um, specifically in the film industry, and probably video game industry as well. Although I think less so. Those projects just take more time as opposed to uh, movie industry, where the time might not matter because if you don't have the resources to do things, it doesn't matter how much time you have. So for indie films, for example, there are occasional small budget indie films that work, but often small indie films are not great. And it's not because a lack of vision or individuality. They have all of these things, but they're lacking the material necessities, um, to make these things. And not just, and I don't just mean like the means of production in the, like, cameras and stuff, although they're lacking those too. But we've seen great films be filmed on like an iPhone, so I don't even
Mhm.
think that that's necessarily the case. But the other things that they don't necessarily have access to are, um, uh, experienced. I don't want to say talented because, these actors and actresses might be talented, but they're not experienced enough to use that talent effectively. Uh, and so sometimes that falls apart, because the directors might not be experienced. Their vision can't show through, and that might be because, like, maybe they're, the DP and editors aren't experienced, or maybe not just good. Maybe they can't find even good ones in any of the scenarios. So they're held back by these limitations. And what capitalism does do, partially because it's the system we live in, it might not be the case if we don't live in that system, is it does allow people to, pull in, the talent for projects that might then be more artistic, or at least look more artistic, and express that individuality. I think one of the kind of examples of this, and it's done purely for capitalist reasons, is going to be that, assuming everything that I've heard is true, I'm going to assume that the things I've heard are true. James Gunn's new Suicide Squad, where the studio just backed off, they removed themselves basically and said, James Gunn, basically do whatever you want, whatever characters you want to use, just it's your vision. We know you're going to make us money. Um, but that choice is done purely for capitalism, and he has to go in recognizing that he has to make these things. However, it is pretty much his vision, and he's being allowed to do whatever he kind of wants to do within that, although it's not his characters or anything, so there is that constraint as well. But it looks like that will be more successful in that way. Other terms would be like Guillermo del Toro movies that are gorgeous films, regardless of whether they work on a plot point. Some of them definitely do not. But they have those visions, and they can only make them work because they have the finances available for things like special effects.
So what I would say that I think the kind of what I think of the problem with this is that I think that you can we on one hand we can say that we can have the studio and the producers kind of take a hands-off approach and kind of give the director free reign, but if the director is still kind of still bound by the profit motive as long as it's is like a big budget movie, and essentially what the profit motive is like an incentive to democratize art, in the way that I see it, as in order to make money you want to appeal to the most amount of people possible, and um it's that's kind of I view that as a counter force for individuality in art, and like a corruptive force that like prevents people from being individualistic in their art a lot of the time. um
Yeah, I would agree.
that's how I conceive of that. And I acknowledge that people with a low budget, kind of like in medium such as film, for example, are at a disadvantage. But I think that that's all just all the more like well, because like I said, I think that individualism is not the like it's not necessarily what makes something good art, but I think it's what makes it art. Um, so one could be entirely individualist, but also just entirely bad at whatever they're doing.
Sure.
And the result would be bad art. And on the other hand, somebody could be entirely like very, very skilled at what they're doing, but could have no individuality, and just be looking to appeal to people. And then that's how you get movies like Transformers, for instance.
Right. Like museum pieces, like forgeries and things. They're really good. They're really good at what they do, but they're not
Mhm.
doing. They're not acting on
There's
their own. They're
there's no expression.
yeah, or very little at the best.
Oh, I would say if you're like replicating things, I'd say there's virtually none.
Yeah,
Like the goal is to express yourself as little as possible.
true. I think sometimes people try to sneak in their own little like flourishes, which is how some forgeries get caught, right? Because they do try to express
Hmm.
themselves in some way. Um,
Yeah.
so, what about art within art? So, for example, if we go back to the Transformers thing, which I keep pushing on things that I don't like because I feel like using examples that I don't like in ways that are positive um, helps me be less biased in some ways. So this is why I'm using Michael Bay films. I don't like Michael Bay. I don't like his films.
Yeah. Hmm.
However, what I have to recognize is that he has been innovative and developed art in films in specific ways, and those tend to be with the way that he uses like camera angles and uh, shots. Specifically, I think he would make a really good like director of photography. I don't think he makes a good director, but if he was controlling those like shots and angles and the way that the camera moves around, that is but maybe it's because he has that individualism there. Like that's the thing that he has control over, or he feels like he does, that doesn't really necessarily fit into a profit motive. I don't know because I don't know him. But in that way,
Are you making it? Sorry, are you making a distinction here between cinematography and photography, or are
yes,
you kind of
cinematography and photo. So it'd be the
are you
DP in film would be the cinematographer, I guess.
so I would say I think that So you're not saying that he would be a good photographer, you're saying he's a good cinematographer, is that what you're saying?
Yes, yes.
I would disagree with that, but
Because of the, well, I mean, maybe I would if I saw something that he did just that, but what he has done for the filmmaking world is develop these processes that other directors have kind of copied, because they've shown like an art in
unfortunately,
cinematography.
in my
So,
opinion.
fair enough. Don't have to say it's good,
I
but
I would say that watching a Michael Bay fight scene is dizzying
oh,
sometimes with like in Transformers. Like
mhm.
I think it's just not. I would say I think it's not done well, and maybe you could say it's individualistic. Like probably who would think to like just have the camera be as like shaky and unsteady as possible and like have a hard time capturing the action. Like that's pretty individualistic, I guess, because who
Yeah.
else would think to do that? But I think it's just a bad idea. Um so maybe you could say it's like an artistic choice, but I think it's bad though.
I think looking him up right now. Yeah, so he like developed this high angle, low angle thing, the telephoto like swoop thing. And you can argue whether you like it or not, of course. And I agree. I don't think his action is particularly great. Same with like Zack Snyder. All of these like weird, oddly, a lot of these action movie directors, I don't like their action scenes. Um, well, okay, Zack Snyder, I don't like a lot more than his action scenes. Let's face it. Uh, but they tend to get recognized for things other than that. Uh, like it might be like establishing shots, or it might be the way that they use a camera within an action scene, regardless of whether that action scene is good or not. Uh, with the Zack Snyder thing, like if we go back to I think Sucker Punch, there's a lot of really good shots in that film, uh, which I find surprising because I don't think Zack Snyder's particularly good at that. But it shows that he can do some things like that, and some of that is due to the ability with the tools that they have, which they don't really have access to at an indie level. But maybe that's, I don't know.
Does Zack Snyder also do the cinematography, or is he just the director?
I
Does
don't
he
know
have
what
a,
he
a
did for that
cinematographer?
particular movie. I'm sure he has a cinematographer.
I would say probably that's kind of a point in favor of what I'm saying then, because he's kind of I would say in that case he's kind of that's like it's I would say the cinematography is good in spite of him, I would say in that case then.
that very much might be. Oh my god, they changed the IMDb formatting. No, I don't. Cast and crew. Okay, all the buttons are different. Oh my god, Zack Snyder did everything by this. It doesn't have cinematography by Larry Fong. Larry Fong was the DP. Okay, I don't know who that is.
But
Um,
But I essentially I think that having people who are kind of auteurs in film, I think is like a great thing, and I think that the more like we should have more auteurs in film, because I think that that's like the more aspects that you kind of have a say in on your production. I feel like that's just better off for what you're making, because I think again it's your vision all throughout, and if you have a cohesive vision for all these things, I think that that's great. And I think we see auteurs like consistently making good artistic films.
or
um
or at least more cohesive. Sure.
mhm. So I kind of think that that's like an example of why I think individualism again, because I think it's good when when you're kind of you have your vision kind of extends further and further to things, and you have a like if your movie, if you just have no vision for the cinematography, for instance, like if you have a vision for the movie that you're making as a director, but in terms of the cinematography, you just have no vision, and you just kind of say to the cinematographer, you leave it up to them, and you say like, "Hey, you do whatever your vision is because I have no vision on this." Like the result of that is going to be like two people like with like visions that are most likely not like cohesive with each other, kind of like doing their own thing, and it's going to like not they're like the two voices
Yeah.
are not going to be like in line with each other, and like the cinematography it will like not go well with the rest of the movie
Yeah.
oftentimes if they're not on the same page.
Yeah, I feel like this happens a lot in indie films, um, because you have small up and coming people both trying to make a name for themselves. So the director is trying to push so that they can be hired for bigger projects, and same with the cinematographer. And so you get like these competing
Mhm.
issues. They're like, no, I need it to be this way so that they can see what I'm trying to do. Um, and that might be true for like bigger movies too, but
Yeah,
you definitely see that.
exactly. I think if anything, any artistic decision you're making, or any decision you're making in while creating a quote unquote work of art that is not motivated by like individual expression, is I think like not a is a mistake, or it's less artistic. Um, anytime that happens, that you're kind of um saying like that this aspect of this I don't have any vision for or anything to do with it or anything, um essentially.
So does that are we using the term, I want to clarify something again. Probably should have done this a while ago. Are we using the term individualism specifically to mean an individual, or can there be a collective individualism in your mind, at
Definitely cannot be collective individualism.
least?
You can be an individual that's part of a collective, but um I think that the best collectives are made up of individualists, but um that's what I would say about that.
Interesting, because for me, I think uh, most good art is more of a collaborative process. I would say good art here, and a lot of bad art tends to be a completely individual centrist project. And I'll
Sure. So I think it's possible to have like to for people to have like their individual visions to like kind of like coincide with each other so well that it works out.
mm,
Like for example, like the Cohen brothers, I think that it works out pretty well for them. Because it seems like they're kind of on the same page. But I think like I say, I think of this in terms of like a spectrum where it's like the more voices you're putting in, the less likely that it is to be cohesive at the end. And I mean, it can work if your vision is like so cohesive and in line with each other,
right.
and individualist. But I think it's a counter trend is how I conceive of it.
That's fair. It's probably some sort of I would think like bell curve, or maybe just slope at that point, where there's a maximum, there's a threshold for the number of voices that could be in a vision before it starts to just fall apart.
Depending on the medium and the project,
Yeah,
probably for sure.
yeah. Okay, well, I mean that makes sense to me. Um, so it doesn't seem like we disagree as much as I thought we were going to into this. Um, I still have some. I still think that there can be art within. I'm trying to think of how to phrase this. I think I'm going to phrase it. I think there can be art within commodity, uh, and by
Yeah, I
that,
think
yeah,
so. I think so too. I just think it's a counter trend.
sure.
And I think it's the more commodity, the less art it is.
Um, yeah, mostly going to get on board. I want to. So I guess what I mean by that is kind of going back to what I was saying. Like, it could be. We'll use a different. We'll use like a Guillermo del Toro film instead of Bay, because I think he's a little bit easier for the art piece. The films themselves might not be. Um, great. Some of them.
Pan's Labyrinth
However,
is great though.
yeah, Pan's Labyrinth is fantastic, and I will absolutely defend that being a fantastic
Mhm.
movie all around.
Yeah, 100%.
But what was that? Shoot, that newer film. It was also gorgeous. But you could even take Hellboy. Can even take Hellboy. I don't think that the film itself is necessarily good art. I mean, I love the film and the first one especially, and I love the visuals in the second one. But even if the film isn't great art, probably because there's a lot of voices, it's an existing IP. Guillermo del Toro is limited in a lot of aspects. Uh, there are pieces within there that probably he had full say of that I would consider art in and of themselves, like a lot of the character design and maybe even set pieces, a lot of the visuals, the things that he's known for, would be art within that. Uh, that are it's still commodified. It's still part of that capitalist project. I mean, it's designed to make money, but uh, like you can look for things within the thing uh, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that's true. I just think that
I
the
don't think
things
it'll
that
let you
are
post links, and
marketable
I
and the things that
don't
are
know how to
artistic,
enable them.
I don't think that they're necessarily like I don't think that something being marketable necessarily precludes it from being artistic, but like I say, I just think it's a counter trend where if something is striving for marketability, that's like a counter trend towards striving for like an artistic vision. But I do think that there are perfect examples of things that are, I would say, like beautiful, like super artistic, and are also marketable, and popular. Even I wouldn't say that I don't think that they are impossible, but I think that they are just in general. I don't think that they are aligned with each other. I think they're kind of a counter trend to each other.
That's fair. Well, I was hoping we disagreed and could talk more. I mean, I think I am largely in agreement with you. I think I'm less strict than you are on this, although not maybe not by much. Um, uh, I don't think that I would necessarily separate commodity and art. I would probably just um, distinguish them between commodified art and um, other art. And I think for me, that's an important distinction because I don't think all commodity is art. And so I'd want to
Mhm.
separate it like commodified art from just commodity in that sense. Um,
I'm kind of I'm not too concerned with the way that people like get a hold of art, I guess. So like if it is kind of like if a movie is made and then it's kind of like mass produced so that people have access to it, like that's I don't think that that's the like the problem, that it's like it's available in that way. But I think it's what I think is important is kind of the motivation of the artist is
sure,
what I think is the important part of it.
that's fair. Um, I wonder if I think I have to think about that a little bit. I wonder if I would consider that poorly developed art as a I don't even know. Like, uh, do you know the artist Goddard? Uh,
Um I don't think so, but maybe, but
he's
I
a
don't think so.
artist local to Las Vegas, um,
I would say probably not then.
and he does. His art thing is called Oh My Goddard, I believe. Yeah, there we go. Um, oh, wait, what? Okay, there's also no Oh My Goddard photography. Not what I was thinking. Oh man. Oh, maybe I'm spelling it wrong. Oh, it's 1D. Okay. Michael Goddard. And he does a lot of these like you might know him if you saw him. Paintings with like olives and pimentos and uh,
I'm
like
looking them up right now.
maraschino cherries. It's Godard. Michael Goddard.
Yeah,
Um,
I've never seen any of these
oh,
before.
okay. So I'm sure. Well, I'm not positive, but I'm. You know, he might have started out as a kind of individualist artist, but once he made a name for himself, he just kind of is stuck in this style. And so almost all of his stuff has
Hmm.
these kind of things. And I'm sure he still has like individualism
Yeah.
within these things, but you see a lot of repeated elements. He is hyper commodified. I mean, I don't know if you like. He has a Goddard Barn game room set. There's a bunch of stuff. I think he has like a humidifier and um, just a bunch of. I don't know. There's a lot. Uh,
Yeah, I would just say he's probably not in it for the art anymore.
yeah,
Is is probably his. He kind of maybe he started. I mean, I'm not familiar with him, but maybe he started out with artistic intention. But once the profit motive became like a feasible thing, maybe that kind of was the counter trend. Kind of was a big factor.
yeah. Chad is saying you need dollars to fund art, though, which I do agree. This goes back to the
Yeah.
conversation with filmmaking. Like you need money to be able to get the tools to make your vision good. You might have a great
Mhm.
vision, but if you just don't have the actors or the editor or sometimes even the camera equipment or the editing software for that matter, um, it's difficult to make that vision a reality.
Yeah, I would say in our current paradigm you do, but I would say that you shouldn't.
Yeah.
I think we should subsidize art, and
Oh,
I think that we should
definitely agree.
subsidize art, and in the future, I think it will become imperative that we do and subsidize art.
Yeah,
Um,
I'm with you on that.
because I think that art is going to become more and more important as time goes on. Um, and this is kind of a Nietzschean kind of idea, but kind of as people lose the meanings that they hold to in their life more and more as time goes on, as we kind of see happening, people are going to need new things to kind of find meaning in their life for, and I think that's kind of what art is kind of there for,
Yeah.
is is for kind of that filling that. So I think as nihilism is kind of encroaching upon society, I think that we kind of, the more that this encroachment happens, the more we're going to need art, and we're going to need to subsidize art in the future, art that's free from profit motive.
Yeah, I don't disagree there. I think that's really important to subsidize art and public services and stuff in general. I think we probably go through like sine waves of like feeling like we need art and then feeling like art is useless. Like you can see it on the graphs of schools and like least necessary professions and things. Sometimes art goes up, sometimes it goes down, and you just see like, oh, we need art in our life. Oh no, we don't. And as we uh, get through that, as for the funding thing, uh, I think there might be kind of a bell curve um, for commodification. So um, for people that are selling art and need to like because they need to feed themselves and their family, right? Because it's not subsidized at the moment. There's probably a point at which uh, that is the case, um, but then there might be a point at which it comes back down again, where you've gone past the point of doing this to better your life, and now you're doing it to purely for the money's sake, or maybe not purely, but mostly for money's sake. Like I don't think Goddard is um, specifically uh, doing it to support himself anymore, unless you consider maybe his lifestyle at this point in excess is what he's supporting, which may be the case. But he's not doing it to like support himself or his family.
Yeah, perhaps
past
perhaps it's more just about like the validation at this point. I mean,
Yeah.
we could try to psychoanalyze this artist, I
Sure.
guess, but I mean, I don't know exactly, but if it seems like what you're saying though is that like definitely you can kind of notice like an artistic expression becoming less pronounced though, right?
Yeah, sure. And I don't. So my chat's saying like for sure art needs to be subsidized, but shitting on other artists for doing work that helps them feed themselves and fund their individual work isn't necessarily helpful. And I want to say like I don't definitely don't mean to do that if I
Wait,
am.
will you say that again?
For sure, art needs to be subsidized, but shitting on artists for doing work that helps them feed themselves and fund their individualistic work isn't necessarily helpful. So I don't want to.
Well, I'm not shitting on artists necessarily, but I have no qualm shitting on art though.
Right.
I think like if you're like you're putting art out there in the world, I'm going to assess it honestly, you know.
I um I tend to uh separate myself typically and assess art subjectively. So I usually I'll say this isn't for me, but I can see that someone else might like it. Usually, there are cases uh, like Zack Snyder movies where I will absolutely be like, I don't think this is helping the world in any way, shape, or form, and is possibly hurting it. Uh, so
I think you can definitely argue about how good um art is. I think you have to kind of set parameters. I think you kind of have to agree about what art is beforehand.
yeah, I
Like
agree. It definitely traps
if I think
artists.
that art is individualism, and I'm talking to somebody who thinks that art is just about if somebody has a view that art, let's just say that they think that art is more like craftsmanship and that you should kind of appease people, like obviously for me and this person to kind of discuss quality of art, we couldn't really have a conversation there because we disagree fundamentally on what quality art is. But um if you kind of share the same baseline for what good or bad art is, you can, I think you can definitely have a discussion on how well something meets that or not, and kind of establish it along those parameters.
Yeah, you've got to go in with the criteria on which to base. And if your criteria don't match, if you think, for instance, that uh, character development is a huge part of art in like movies or video games for that matter, and I'm like, no, character development has nothing to do with the quality of the art of this thing. We can't have a conversation at that point about the quality of that art because we going in with
Or at least not about the character development,
sure.
maybe other aspects, um but I think that I would say that moral I think moral or an ethical philosophy works the same way, where you kind of have to agree on these on the what you suppose, like what the goal of moral philosophy is, or what the goal of aesthetic philosophy is, in order to kind of have that discussion. um you kind of have to have that same baseline, and so that's kind of why my argument is more that the way that I kind of posit we should view art is the best way to achieve good art, essentially, um in terms of how I conceive of good art.
Right. Yeah. So I think so for me the starting point for either of these, or for moral philosophy, would be starting with suffering. If I'm going to be okay, I think suffering is bad, and then we can build from that. But if that building block isn't there for someone else's moral philosophy, I can't have a conversation with them because all of my moral philosophy stems from like this singular idea. For me, for art, it would probably be um, an emotional response uh, in some way, and that's very vague. And a lot of like bad art would probably do that too. But at least once I can, if we have like a similar starting point with that, then we can build from there, and maybe like how it gives an emotional response, and is that like a good or bad way to do that? What emotional response is it giving, and is it like a good or bad way of doing that? We can even.
I would. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I'm just going to build off that. Like, is this? Are they getting there because this is uh, the individualist aspect of providing an emotional response? Is the artist the one providing the emotional response, or is it some mess of ideas that's giving that emotional response? If that makes sense, so they can determine like whether it's
Yeah,
good or
kind
bad
of.
art from that point.
Are you generating the meaning in this, or are you kind of finding the meaning that, or are you kind of experiencing the artist's vision? Kind of. So it's
Right.
kind of how I think of that. I think that the I would say, rather than an emotional response, I would say I think a meaningful experience is how I think is what I think a better way. Because I mean,
Yeah, I don't
for
think
instance,
I disagree.
I could watch a movie that I think is just like abysmal, and is the worst movie, and I could have a strong emotional response like in reaction against this movie, but I don't think that makes this movie art, or good art, uh I should say. But I think what I think meaningful experience is kind of the thing that I kind of look for. I look for things that can kind of create like a meaningful internal experience for me.
Okay,
um is I think a good way of conceiving of it.
that's fair. I think that works probably better than the way I phrased it. And the reason I'm saying that is there's a lot of bad art that I will subject myself to, partially because I want to critique it. And often that art makes me angry, but I don't think it's meaning to. The intent of that art is
Mhm.
not to make me angry. I'm getting
Yeah.
angry because it's doing things
Mhm.
in certain ways. It's not making me feel whatever the purpose of what they were trying to do. It's not doing that. And I'll use
Yeah,
the
I and
example
so
of
that's
yeah.
oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say I was going to use the example of the most recent Wonder Woman movie. I'm sure that they meant for that to be an uplifting and hopeful movie or whatever, and all the entire time I was just screaming at it because of just the lack of I don't know, self-reflection, the lack of introspection of anything that was going on in that film. So
Yeah, I think I think that's pretty fair. I think that
yeah, I'll
the
bring that up in a minute. I think that's a pretty
sorry, what was the last thing you
forget
were
the
saying? I
name.
lost my train of thought.
uh,
How did you start that off?
uh, that Wonder Woman was making me angry because, regardless of what they might have been trying to do, they were failing at every aspect to do the things.
Oh, yeah, yeah, that's what I conceive of that as just like an artistic failure.
Oh,
And that's why
we like art.
I would say, if that's the case, then
I
that
don't
movie
even
is not
dislike bad
not
art
art, because you should
necessarily.
always be on the same page as the artist. When with like for good art, like you should be like seeing what the artist wants you to see, essentially, and kind
Like
of
sometimes I enjoy
see
bad
their
art.
vision for what it is. And appreciate it. Like that's like what I think the goal of good art is. And so if you kind of find enjoyment in something in spite of like what the author, the artist, um was doing, or their intent, um then then I would just say that that is like it's an artistic failure, where that you are able to find enjoyment in other ways in,
It's my
that are
Constantine.
kind of, yeah, you're kind of repurposing art into entertainment.
Right. I am enjoying this thing. I recognize it's not bad. It's not good art, but it's enjoyable art, um, which I think is an important separation. I have in chat someone saying, um, so there's something they're giving a definition and they forgot who gave it, but that art should disturb those who are comfortable and comfort the disturbed, and that's an interesting and I think appealing definition in a lot of instances. So taking people like out of their comfort zone, so the disturbed, their comfort zone
Yeah,
would be being
I
disturbed.
think I think I agree with that. I can't think of any problem. Yeah, I can't think of any problems with that. I think I agree with that.
Okay.
Um, yeah, that sounds like a. I don't know if I'd say that's like the definition of art. Like, but that isn't how. Like, if you ask me what is art, that isn't how I would define it. But I would say that that's probably true of art, though.
A lot of
I
good
would
art
say.
would do those things. Yeah.
Hmm.
And then I have a clarification here, asking, is it bad art or just art you do not like? And I tried to clarify.
Hmm.
We definitely
Yeah.
like art. We want art. We love art. Both of us
Hmm.
are, I think, are together on that part. And
Hmm.
I was saying that I don't even not like bad art a lot of the times. There's a lot of bad art that I enjoy. It's not bad art that I don't like. Um, it's I would argue a subsection of bad art that is um, maybe art that is uh, doing the opposite message of what it's attempting to do. So it's, I would say, maybe harmful art to the purpose of what the creator was trying to do. Um, that would be art that I don't like, which is why I don't like Wonder Woman 1984. I think it's actually doing the opposite of what they intended it to do. Um, uh, and I think that that's what makes it both bad and unlikable, if that makes sense.
Hmm. Yeah, I don't want good art to happen to be good. I want it to have been designed and made good,
Right.
essentially.
Not
Um,
accidentally good.
yeah. I wouldn't I that's kind of I would say if something's accidentally good, I would just say that it's it could be entertainment, but it's not art because I think you're always on the same page as the artist for good art,
Okay.
I would say.
Um, okay. Uh, we are coming up on like 4:20 ish. I have another appointment in a little bit, but I would like to take a break before that.
Yeah, at 4:20.
uh, not because of that, but just because I wanna rest. I've got an Overwatch team
Yeah.
that I'm on that we're gonna do some practicing for.
Oh, cool.
Uh,
Yeah. But what the one other thing that I meant to
Absolutely.
comment on,
Sure, sure.
from for the thing that the person in your chat said about good art or art you don't like. That's kind of why in the beginning we kind of made the distinction, and I brought up David Hume
Mm,
to kind of say, there's the you can have you can understand like what you can have a separate understanding of what you think is good from what you personally enjoy, and they don't have to um they don't have to coincide, but I would say I do think it is good when they
yeah, I
coincide
think
though, I
that's
would
usually
say,
true.
because I think it's always good to be
Or maybe
thoughtful about the
the
things
best
that
art
you
does that.
enjoy and to
That's the
have
really
good
good art.
reasons for the things you enjoy and to kind of not mindlessly consume, I guess. And so I think it is always good when you have good reasons for liking the things that you like that. Um and it's always better, I think, if things can like benefit you or show you new things essentially.
Yeah.
But I will absolutely say that there is such a thing as good and bad art. I absolutely believe that for sure,
Yeah. I'm not going to disagree with
regardless
that.
regardless of my subjective view. I think you I can make claims about I think this is good or bad regardless of if I like it.
I don't, using the concepts that we brought in before from the fictionalism, I think sure, but I would have to recognize that uh, if you're going to ask me to use the scientific method to find bad and dilute the thing into
Mhm.
essence of bad, that's not going to happen,
Yeah, it's
because
not a scientific thing, it's
yeah,
a meaning thing.
yeah.
It's
So
philosophy.
yeah, so it's going to be subjective to an extent, but I
I would
think
say it could be intersubjective though.
yeah, sure, we could make very good arguments and about it being bad. I think is the case, but yeah, I will absolutely agree that there's good and bad art, and that it's not. What I would say is, I don't want to say objective, but less subjective than people would probably many people
Yeah.
would probably say. Like people say art is subjective, and I would go, sure,
That bothers me. It
but
bothers me so much when people say that because it's so
yes,
simplistic. When
yeah,
people just kind of be like, "Well, it's all subjective, anyways." It's
yeah,
like to me, that just is like a thought terminating thing of just like I'm not going to
yes.
think about this anymore.
Yeah, no,
Is
I
how
would
that
be
comes
like,
across to
yeah,
me.
sure, it's subjective, but let's think about this. I don't think it's
Yeah.
is as subjective as you're claiming it to be. Um,
Hmm.
absolutely, absolutely. Okay.
Yeah. This was a fun combo.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. It went for a while, and I'm happy. I've still got energy. I do have coffee, and this is great. I had a great time talking to you. Is there anything you'd
Yeah.
like to plug on your end before we end?
Um.
I think that's a thing people
Not
do in these
really.
conversations.
Not particularly. I mean, I'm Saltshaker on YouTube.
Right.
Saltshaker's on Twitch. I guess.
I have
That's kind of the main thing.
I have your Twitch,
Yeah.
Twitter, and YouTube up on my screen, um,
Oh, okay,
so
cool.
people can
Thank you.
see all of that stuff there. Uh, I'm just Hagel Plays on Twitch
Yeah.
and Twitter. Um, I technically have a YouTube channel. I don't think anything is on it, but I would have to double check because I don't remember. I don't use it very much.
Yeah. I'm trying to just get into posting on my YouTube. I'm trying to post like the videos of the debates I have. I have one up that I had with the nihilist on my channel, and
Mhm.
I had a debate a week ago that I'm gonna upload soon.
All right.
But yeah, that's about all I have on there. But yeah, definitely enjoyed this convo. If you want to talk again in the future, I'm definitely down.
Yeah, we'll DM, we'll message, we'll think of another subject. Maybe we'll find of a way that we disagree a little bit more and can have a little bit more um, conflict in our conversation. I don't mean that like in a bad way. Like I enjoyed this conversation, but
Yeah.
we agreed
No,
so
I like.
much. So
Mhm. Yeah, I enjoy having like friendly conflict with
yeah,
people.
yeah, wanna get to the meat, and maybe we can convince each other of some things. I think you convinced me of a few things and how to think of art, so that maybe I hadn't considered before. So I think that was good.
Yeah, I
Um,
enjoyed it.
yeah, so thanks for the conversation. I'm going to head out and take a little break before the next thing. Enjoy your evening.
Yeah, you too.
All right, take care.
All right. Yep, see you later.
Let's do this. So we're back here. Yeah, so that was a pretty good chat with Saltshaker. I'll put this on the YouTubes, I guess, when I remember. So we'll look for that. I should probably have like a dedicated upload day, like real streamers do, but I don't. So I'll try to do that. Maybe I'll take clips out if I like it, and if I really want to get around to editing it, I think that's probably more bite size and manageable. Maybe like a couple 20-minute chunks or something to put up. Um, but yeah, I think it's basically 4:30. I've got another thing in an hour, so I'm going to take a little bit of a break and just kind of rest and relax. Um, yeah, thank you guys for tuning in. Thanks for the comments and chat response. I think it was good to bring up, and we had a lovely conversation. Otherwise, I will talk to you guys next time, whatever that random streaming time is. All right. Bye.